Filing old, late tax returns. Should you do it? Hi, I'm Sunny Weiderman from Personal Tax Advisors, here with a tax tip for Canadians. Now, if you're behind on filing your income tax returns, should you file old returns if the Canada Revenue Agency doesn't seem to have noticed? Should you or shouldn't you? That's what we're going to talk about in this video. And the answer is yes. So please like and subscribe and... Okay. Maybe a little more detail would be helpful, but I will say the answer is always yes. Okay, let's get into specifics. So I'm going to start by saying I recognize that I am biased. I am a tax professional. I prepare tax returns for a living. Yes, I know. And of course I'm going to say file your tax returns. However, bias or no, it's actually true. There's almost no situation where you're not at least somewhat better off for having filed old returns. So let's start with the practical advantages. The first one, this one is a little bit obvious, is if the Canada Revenue Agency is already sending you letters demanding a tax return, you should file. If you don't, they're not necessarily going to put you in jail or anything, but what they really frequently do is just file a return for you. Like they ask you to file, and then they ask you to file, and they ask you to file. And if you don't do it for long enough, then they become stressed and anxious due to the empty spot where a tax return should be, and they fill it with a return that they make up. And the problem with that is they never make up a really good return. They always make up the crappiest return they can possibly put together for you. Why? To encourage you to file a return. And also because why shouldn't they? You know, they're going to file whatever is sort of available to them with whatever information they have, and they're going to file usually a return that overstates your income in some way or understates your deductions, and with the worst possible outcome. And then they're going to present you with an income tax bill. And even though the tax return is completely made up, and even though it may not even be accurate, the tax bill stands. The tax bill is real until you overturn it by filing a return. So just to put a fine point on it, if the Canada Revenue Agency files a return on your behalf, you can override it by filing a return of your own. And I will point out that filing the return of your own after CRA has already filed one on your behalf does not make your return, the one that you file, more likely to be audited. There's no additional suspicion because now you're filing. In our experience, and I have been doing this for 2 decades now, if you file a return to replace a return that the Canada Revenue Agency has filed on your behalf, which is called a notional return, that's what CRA calls it, or an arbitrary return, or an arbitrary assessment, which is sort of a more accurate and more common name for it. If they file something arbitrary for you and you file a follow-up return, generally they'll just take your return as you filed it and replace theirs. No questions asked. Filing a return that CRA has already done is not inherently risky. All it can do is make things better. So I do really recommend that you file if they've already filed. Now, what if the Canada Revenue Agency has not filed something on your behalf and they're not asking for the return? Do you still have to file? Well, the law says you have to file if you owe tax. If you don't owe tax, you don't need to file. So you might think, well, I know I didn't earn really enough money to owe tax, and so I'm not going to file. Okay, but generally when people earn very little, there's generally very few returns that show nothing owing and also exactly zero, like exactly zero. Generally returns show an amount owing or a fundable amount. And the reason is because if your income is so low that you're not taxable, generally you're entitled to some credits. For example, the GST HST credit, which is essentially a rebate for GST and HST spent on living expenses that's available to low and moderate income earners. But Canada Revenue Agency doesn't know that you're a low or moderate income earner until you file a return, so you can't have that credit unless and until you file. So unlocking credits like that, also in Ontario, there's an important one called the Trillium benefit, which is linked to being low or moderate income and also paying rent in Ontario to live. If you were fit into those two categories, chances are you've got some money coming to you if you file that return. Now, obviously, another way that you can have money coming to you is actually having a tax refund. Now, a tax refund is generally when you've had usually salaried income, where tax has been withheld at source, and the withholding is a little more than you actually owe, which it typically is. In a case like that, filing a return will release that tax refund. So you definitely want to do it. And I will mention here that you can go back a maximum of 10 years. So if you know that there's a tax refund waiting for you for a tax year that is 10 years ago, get that return filed before the end of the year. Because after the end of the year, that tax return becomes lost to you, and that refund is just gone. So all these points are practical, usually monetary reasons to file an income tax return. But there is another angle to this, which in my experience is almost as important. And that is the psychological angle, the emotional angle. You know, you may think that emotions aren't as important as money, but actually money is only important because of the way it affects our emotions. And emotionally, in my experience, unfiled tax returns are a burden, an emotional burden on people. And you may have an idea of this as well because you're watching this video. If you're thinking about filing old returns, it may be that there is an emotional component to that. Every time you think about your unfiled returns and you feel a little bad about it, it's draining some of your energy. It's taking something from you. In effect, it is costing you something every single time you think about your unfiled returns. I am biased, I know, but I have had enough experience with this to know also that it is very draining to be struggling emotionally against an enemy whose size and dimensions you can't even conceive of. And what I mean by that is you don't really know how much money you owe in tax until you've filed a return. When you haven't filed returns, you have no idea how bad it is. And it may be worse than you think, it may be better than you think, but not really knowing is itself an additional burden. I'm speaking from experience here, experience with a lot of clients who have filed a lot of old returns and some of whom have owed a lot of money. All of them have expressed the relief of just having it done. And even if the amount of tax that you owe is considerable, and it might be, it's possible, knowing what it is the first step in actually conquering it. Not knowing what it is means you can't do anything at all. You can't plan, you can't start actions, you can't do anything until you know what it is, and you don't know what it is until you file. So I'm really speaking from the heart here. Filing old tax returns will make you feel better. I have never had a situation where that wasn't the case. And we have filed a lot of old returns for a lot of people. If it's weighing on you, file those old returns. Nothing is actually worse than the feeling that you're having right now. If you're not ready to file yet, well, do me a favor, like the video. That would help me out a little bit. And stay tuned to my channel by subscribing, because I am putting together a little sort of a free guide to sort of how to approach filing old returns. And I'm going to make that available to people once it is ready. And you'll know about it if you subscribe to my channel. I hope that has clarified things a little bit, given you a little bit of an idea of what to do. And I do hope that if you have old returns to file, that you'll actually file them, because that is the best outcome I can hope for you. I'll see you guys in the next one.